true in this particular case.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But it's phrased in such a way that, okay, never mind.
Okay, but look, this was Bertrand Russell's favorite example when it came to this particular point. Not favorite, I mean, it's one of the examples that he used. So you get the point that conditions can be met, but we don't know. Now, later on, what basically happened is, in philosophy, there was this discussion about how do we define knowledge? Yeah. Because Gettier came along and he showed Gettier cases where conditions are met, but you can't actually have knowledge. Today, where we are at is that there isn't an agreed upon definition like there was in the past. So we can give a fitri answer to this, I believe, from an Islamic perspective. But before I give that, I want you to let me know what you think about knowledge. How would you define knowledge, and where are you at with this particular level? Like, where do you stand?
I define truth so far, what I'm working with. Knowledge, I think, so we're on epistemology.
Yes.
I think, as with all things, I'm going to sound Petersonian or whatever, it's about value hierarchies. So there is a value hierarchy of certainty, and knowledge sits on that value hierarchy. Yes?
I agree. Okay. But I'm talking about the definition of knowledge. I'm not talking about the value of knowledge.
Well,
so,
I think knowledge is something which is a synonym for certainty, unless you're careful. And if you mean it as a synonym for certainty, then it occurs in degrees. If you mean it as a cognitive intellectual statement, it's a slightly different thing. And
sure.
You need to be very clear in which context you're using.
Oh, yeah, but a residual question, if we don't take either of those parts, is, and this is what I was trying to get to, prior to Gettier and him showing that these examples are wrong, justification was a key part of knowledge.
Sure.
Now, what I'm going to say is I believe justification is not required for knowledge. You can know something, but you don't need justification.
I think I agree, and we may be heading in the same. Can I describe?
Sure.
Do you want to define for me your epistemic hierarchy, or can I define mine for you?
You can do yours.
Okay, my epistemic hierarchy would go at the bottom of the level of certainty. We have anecdotal information. Okay. Hang on. Okay.
Just more straight. Continue.
So I'm on my ego. I've actually got a bit of flow, and I want to get recorded because I care about this stuff. I like to get it right.
Sure.
So on the epistemic hierarchy, at the bottom I think sits anecdotal evidence. In other words, somebody else tells you something. Yes. One level up from that, and I'm using all of these simultaneously to determine what's true. One level up from that is empirical. What's actually coming in directly. So if somebody tells me anecdotally, there's nobody at Speaker's Corner at the moment, but my empirical evidence is telling me there is, then the empirical evidence trumps the anecdotal evidence, yes? Right. We agree?
Yeah.
Okay. The next level up from that, I would say, is inferential, where I start using syllogism of deduction, induction, and logic to try and further my understanding of what's true, and I do that on the basis of the axiomatic assumption I live in a self-consistent universe. So what I'm looking for is harmony and non-contradiction. Plato's principle of non-contradiction. Yeah?
Sure. Can I just ask a question at this point? Why have you not mentioned analytical already? Because to do inferential, you would need some analytics.
I'm taking analytics to be within the inference, I think, if
right.
I'm understanding your term. So empirical is just what my senses are hitting.
No, look, I don't disagree with you with anecdotal, empirical, but I think the next level should be analytical.
Which I take to be inferential, that's what I mean.
No, but what I mean by analytical is inferential is inference, right? So it could be, you could have inductive and deductive arguments. What I mean is analytical statements.
As opposed to synthetic statements?
Yes.
Okay, analytical statements, my understanding is analytical statements are statements like the billiard ball is round, yes? Which the word feels, it seems to me that's just a descriptive empirical statement. I don't know why they put the label analytical on it. Analytical to me means you're chopping things up and thinking about it. Synthetic apparently means deducing, inferring certain predictions about how the vehicle will act. And so I think that, to me, the word analytical seems better. So the labels themselves I find counterintuitive, but what the hell? So by
Sure.
empirical, analytical and empirical are the same within our framework, aren't they?
I would say analytical is more certain, because you're dealing with, say, pure mathematics would be analytical, but when you're dealing with
Then it's not empirical.
no, it's not empirical. Empirical is lower.
Why isn't mathematics within inference? Why isn't it within induction?
Okay,
deduction,
so yeah, that's a good question. Well, it is within deduction, but it's not within induction. So you don't need. You have one apple, another apple, and therefore you have two apples. You don't need to keep checking two objects to know 1 + 1 is 2. That is
Correct.
true a priori. It's true before experience, right? We're not really disagreeing. What I'm trying to get to is that
I'm aware I've seen a video of yours where you said something very interesting to me, which was, I don't believe in propositions from induction, only from deduction. I think you said that.
no, I said I take deduction over induction.
Right, which raises a whole fascinating topic in itself, but go on.
Yeah. So we're really not disagreeing when it comes to the hierarchy so far.
So far we're good?
But so far we're good.
Okay.
But what I
Right,
would
well,
say,
then I'll go above it.
sure.
And above that, I think we have what you might be alluding to, which is instinctive knowledge. I know I'm in pain if I'm in pain. I don't need inference, I don't need rationality. I get hit by primary experience, yeah? That is a certainty. So the one thing I know for sure is I am, yeah? It occurs at that level of instinct. Everything else is up for grabs.
sure.
I can't be, in the epistemology, things I think I know by any other mechanism are always open for revision. But the certainty of cognitive experience and phenomenological quality is undeniable, and that's my prime axiom, yeah? Would you agree with that axiom?
I would agree, but I wouldn't say it's the prime necessarily. I would say there's something even higher than that.
Wow.
There's something even higher than sensation. So you can have someone who is.
I'm not saying it's sensation, I'm saying in terms of certainty.
Oh.
The thing I can be most certain of in that hierarchy is I am experiencing.
Sure.
Experience is occurring, yeah?
Sure. Experience is occurring. That is, I think you should separate that from the sensation of pain, say. Because I think you can have a dream in which you're getting a pain, but that isn't actually in reality. So you could actually subcategorize those two things rather than putting them in the same category. The highest form of certainty is knowledge that does not require justification, and me as a Muslim, I would say that is belief in God, belief in morals, and our instinct telling us that certain things are true.
Damn. Well, now we actually really disagree.
Okay.
I'm afraid we do. I think
There's no problem.
I think you put at the very top of the tree a very complicated analytical mechanism, which we have to explore and is an important tool, but I think it's a mistake to put it at the top. I think my instinctive certainty of qualia is the single thing I can be most certain about, and all of my other inferences arise naturally from that, including your assumption, your correct or incorrect assumption that the more complicated analytical statements you made are true. They may or may not be true, but they predicate on I am. If you are not, there's no chance that what you just said is the case.
Yeah, but when it comes to, I think, therefore I am.
Yeah.
Descartes' way of solving this was God.
He included God in it, but I mean, with hindsight, if you look at it, I could argue you don't need the God thing. I'm not beholden to Descartes. I'm standing on the merits of I am experience.
Okay, no.
And I
So
think
you
it's
stop there.
I think it's better to say I feel, therefore I am. So I think Descartes made it over rational. I think I'm always feeling. Maybe I'm not always thinking, but I'm always feeling. And if you want to get cosmic about it, I think the fact that the name of God means I am, therefore I am, certainly in the Hebrew tradition, may be very significant. The fact that God's name happens to translate as almost the axiomic statement of certainty that everybody will always be able to make possibly isn't a coincidence.
That's an interesting idea. I'm not sure where to go with that, because I haven't.
Just let it breathe.
Yeah, no.
It would be entirely appropriate that
Sure.
the hidden, the most important name or the most important thing in the cosmos would happen to be the axiomic certainty that would be true for all people for all
Yeah.
time.
The thing is, I've never seen it connected that way. So the way you've connected it there, it's just opening up some possibilities in my mind. That okay, yeah, no, it's interesting. So that shows you think about this quite often.
I'm a lot for a long time.
Okay, I can see that. So I can't comment on that, but that's interesting. When it comes to my hierarchy, we agree on pretty much everything. Of course, we disagree at the top, but at the top, the way I see it is, God is the lens which allows us to make sense of any form of reality. That's my first and primary most important thing, which is why, did you see the discussion between Muhammad Hijab and Peterson?
Yeah, just quickly, we'll go there.
Yeah.
What you just said would seem to align with my definition of truth,
Right.
which is that it optimizes hermeneutics, which is the same thing as you just said, isn't it?
No, I'm saying something slightly different.
Say it again.
What I'm saying is, God. Okay, I see why you think that. I see why you think that.
The word God and truth almost become interchangeable.
Yeah, well,
according to our definition, which seems like a good thing.
Well, in Islam, the name of God is the truth.
Okay.
That is actually God's name, Al-Haq, the truth.
Sure.
So we even have poetry that everything besides God is in vain. Everything besides God is basically not true, right? Even the most basic statement in Islam, the Shahada, the first part of it, La ilaha illallah. That the first part is a total negation, an absolute negation of everything. And then the affirmation of God being the only one worthy of worship, the only, if you like, the true value. Yeah, the true thing that we should be trying to reach in life, right? So when it comes to God, I see why you're saying that it's an epistemic. It's epistemically, practically useful.
Epistemically, absolutely inevitable statement of truth for all people for all time.
Yes.
Therefore, it's profoundly important.
Yeah. I would add, and as a Muslim, that it's not just that it's metaphorically useful, it is absolutely true. That's the difference between us.
I'm with you as well. That's why truth happens within subjective experience. It's a qualitative thing. It's a value thing. Anyway, sorry, where were we?
So I wanted to link this to the conversation between Muhammad Hijab and Peterson, and then Peterson and Dawkins, because this shows.
I haven't seen Dawkins one yet. I haven't heard about it.
Okay, but I'll summarize what the issue was. So in the beginning of the discussion between Hijab and Peterson, Hijab was speaking about the beliefs that we have in Islam, and then he also mentioned an argument for God's existence, and Peterson was not really interested. He was more like,
because Peterson said, quote, "Why do you use propositional logic?"
Yes.
And at that point the conversation took a tangent.
yes,
And I've got to say, being honest, I wish it hadn't, but I mean, it's a tangent that can be taken. I just wish it maybe hadn't happened at that point in the meeting. Yeah?
Sure.
But it did, and you're right, it's interesting that propositional logic has limitations, would agree.
Yeah, of course. So then Peterson spoke about how his problem with new atheists, people like Dawkins, is that they make God into a proposition, right? That is something to be proven or disproven. Now, from the Islamic perspective, and I think Hijab did a good job in trying to explain this, is that we believe you don't need to prove God's existence. We believe that it's something innate, something is true, it's something that's fitri. Yet we still believe that you can use rational arguments to show that God exists. So we believe in both, right?
Yeah, I think for me it works like this. Intellect and rationality is amoral. It is not a moral quality. It's not a spiritual quality. You can be very analytical.
Say that again.
It's not a moral quality.
No, before that. You said rationality is amoral.
Rationality is amoral. It doesn't mean immoral. It just means it
amoral.
operates in the world of facts. It's morally and value neutral, okay? Moral qualities are things like honesty, empathy, courage. These are the spiritual virtues. And the analytical tool is just there to help you. I'd say the metaphor is like climbing a mountain, yeah? There's a moral mountain to climb. You're only going to climb the moral mountain using courage, empathy, strength, etc. Yes, the moral virtues. You use the analytical tool just to help you to work around the obstacles. Yes, But if you only use the analytical tool, you won't climb the mountain. You'll just sit at the bottom of the mountain going,
Sure.
oh, there's a problem, there's a problem. So it's a very, very secondary tool, and it shouldn't be
Sure.
overrated.
Just before we carry on there's a verse of the Quran I wanted to bring out on my phone, but I'm going to paraphrase the meaning of it.
Okay.
It's that God says the worst people essentially are those who do not reason. So people who do not value rationality, if you like, people who do not use rationality, them being in a way immoral, that's an inference you can make from that particular verse. So are you saying that rationality in of itself intrinsically is amoral?
I'm saying it's amoral and it's a tool. It's an incredibly powerful tool.
But if somebody doesn't use it, would you say that they are immoral? Because I believe they are immoral.
No, there I don't, because I'm basically mystic and more Sufi, Kabbalistic. I think the primary level of certainty is mystical. It's just I am, and it's beyond rationality.
No, I understand what you're trying to get to, but I'm asking something different. I'm saying if somebody refuses to use their reason and they want to just follow blindly their culture or their desire or something that's in their self-interest, I would say that that's immoral because they're not valuing rationality.
I would say, I'd agree with you, they're falling short of their fitra because their potential is to use their good tool.
Okay, so we agree there. Okay.
So use the tool, but understand the limitations of the tool.
Yeah.
I don't ever expect to cognitively know the truth, the absolute truth. I assume, maybe rightly, maybe wrongly, that it's beyond my limited monkey brain, okay? And that God is above and beyond my cognition ultimately and is mystical. So so respect the tool, but know its limits. And its limits seem to be clear from, for example, Hume's fallacy of induction, which I've heard Muhammad Hijab mention, which is totally true. So we need to understand that all of our beliefs, even if you're a scientist, ultimately are based on faith. You have to make a statement of faith before you can build an intellectual, moral, cognitive hierarchy.
Yeah.
Secondly, you've got Gödel's incompleteness theorem, which makes it clear exactly the same thing in mathematics. And then you've got what's going on in quantum physics, which just goes, okay, common sense ain't going to work here, yeah? So all of those things tell you there's a boundary condition on knowledge, which is why in conservative Islam, correct me if I'm wrong, I think you're overvaluing that kind of cognitive knowledge. It's not the most powerful tool, and it's not a moral tool.
So it's not the most powerful, but it is a tool which God has given us.
Agreed, but you just put it at the top of the hierarchy.
No, I didn't put it at the top. The top in my hierarchy was our fitrah.
I thought you said knowledge. I'd agree with you with fitrah.
Yeah.
Okay, fitrah's at the top, yeah.
Yeah.
That's the thing towards everything should aim. It's like a compass.
No, it's not where it aims. The fitrah allows you to see the rest of the world. So rationality wouldn't function unless you had the fitrah. Now, I just want to make a little point here. We usually, when we talk about I think, therefore I am, and going back to these initial propositions, we speak about Descartes. But Descartes, we can argue, took this from Ghazali. Because Ghazali, I'm sure you're aware of...
No, I'm very badly rated.
Sure. Ghazali was one of the most well-known Islamic jurists, scholars, philosophers in history. So he existed before Descartes. Many of his writings, actually, because remember, the Islamic world was more advanced than Europe, and then Europe got that through the Renaissance. So many of his teachings and writings you will find in Enlightenment thinkers, right? So one of them is in regards to this. So there's a lot of resonance between the writings of Descartes, who came later, and Ghazali. The difference being, Ghazali, in terms of his spiritual writings and his sort of belief in God, he articulates himself in a more coherent way than Descartes. And I think that's what I'm trying to, those are some of the arguments I'm trying to elucidate.
How about I just take your word for it?
Okay. Why not?
I think, you know, I think
you should look up his writings.
I think whatever's true is true and whatever's good is good, and to an extent, to me, whatever culture or history it comes from is secondary. I don't, you know, whether it was from whichever tradition, the Western or Islamic, if it's good, it's good. And I'm sure that the Islamic tradition has contributed a huge amount. And it carried the Aristotelian tradition for the West when we hit the Dark Ages, so thank you. But, you know, reality
and it built on
is now the here and now.
Yeah.
And I think the spiritual journey is an individual one of one-to-one with God, not a collective tribal thing. So I'm not taking any credit or discredit for what my tribe's done. I'm responsible for me.
Well, in Islam, it does teach you that rather than following your society, you will be accountable yourself.
Yeah.
So there is that.
I'm being judged on my personal moral choices. I'm not responsible for other people.
You're not, but you do have a responsibility of enjoining the right and forbidding the wrong. That is.
I'm entangled with other people,
Yeah.
but that my other people are secondary to my primary.
Yeah.
If there's a God as you envisage him, he'll be asking me how I conducted my life on Judgment Day based on my choices, not what members of my tribe did.
Yeah. I mean, it's mainly about an individual responsibility that you actually have. So we're not really disagreeing on much. I actually wanted
this
to.
is good.
This
is good.
This is good, but
because there's too
sometimes.
much disagreement down here. We can start disagreeing if you wish, but I have areas I'd like to investigate.
Yeah, there are areas I'd like to investigate. I actually wanted to grab a coffee, and I had a conversation to actually get. I'm going to be coming next week, so we can have a disagreement if you want next week.
Okay.
Because agreement's good, but it's also good to get into which points we disagree on, because I think fundamentally I want to try and convince you. Now, I know you don't like preaching, I know you don't like, okay, but I want to try and convince people that I meet that when it comes to Allah, when it comes to God, it's not just that it's metaphorically useful, it's pragmatic. It is absolutely true. I know you don't like absolutes, but that's
I do like absolutes. My driving instinct is to try and find my assumption and hope is that religion is driving towards absolute truth, and that the absolute true and the absolute good and the absolute meaningfulness are synonymous. So teleology, morality, and ontology are all just synced in the same beautiful precision. So it's very monistic, yeah? So I absolutely am aiming for absolute truth. I'm hoping it's possible, absolute moral truth. I'm just not going to commit to the certainty that it's the case. So I'm using modal.
But you're not going to commit yet. You don't know whether you may commit in the future.
I think I'm morally obliged to be honest. I think honesty is a virtue. And if I'm going to be intellectually honest and I'm going to believe in a self-consistent universe, when I see inconsistencies, I have to respond to them. So I'm not 100% committing. And also I already know from, as we said, Gödel's in completely theorem and Hume, I can't know anything 100% for sure anyway. So everything in terms of my beliefs has to be slightly contingent. But I work with the best odds. All you can do is play the best odds. And I look at the best odds I can and then modify them as realistically and honestly as I can.
Yeah, but I think I spoke to you about this before. There are certain absolutes though. There are certain absolutes that you can't be, for example, experience. The fact that you are experiencing reality right now. That's an absolute. Also that truth is intrinsically valuable. That's an absolute.
Yes, I would agree.
Yeah.
It's
So
intrinsically it's intrinsically valuable to any given individual. I don't think what I can't do is I don't think it's possible to make statements of absolute moral certainty as propositional generalities. For example, thou shalt not steal. Okay? I think all religions, not just Islam, have a problem with this, and it's a contextual problem, which is I don't think it's always objectively true that you shouldn't steal. There are given scenarios in which maybe you should steal. So although as a general rule it's excellent, it's meant to be interpreted as a general rule. And the moral absolutes only ground down at the individual level.
Sure.
That's when the absolute comes into play.
Sure,
You're not going to get
but it's important to make a distinction here, which is that Islam doesn't say thou shalt not steal is an absolute. It doesn't say, like for example, things in some of the other commandments, like thou shalt not take a life, right? Yeah. Islam doesn't say that those things are absolute. When it comes to only God is worthy of worship, Islam will say, yeah, that's absolute. But the reason why it wouldn't say the other things are absolute is because of what you said, is that there's certain conditions within which a person has to take someone's life. If you could have somebody who's about to take Hitler's life, which will save the lives of millions of people.
Exactly.
So, do you understand?
Yeah, no, we totally agree.
Yeah.
Because I've heard Muhammad Hijab said, he said, we say that these rules are objective, but they're not absolute.
Yeah.
And I'm instinctively hunting for the absolute, because under the bonnet of this, presumably there are absolutes, and I think the absolutes occur when you ground it out at the level of the individual. Yeah.
But the absolute, even within the Ten Commandments, like I mentioned, is that there's none worthy of worship except God. Meaning nothing you should have your
I need to think about that more, because literally walking to the park today, my initial assumption was generalized propositional statements can't be absolute, but I'm starting to suspect that only applies to negative assertions, things you shouldn't do. But it might be possible to make absolute positive assertions because they're aspirational to an idea, yeah?
Yeah, but you can, I think, make it with negative statements too, because you can say you should never worship anyone besides God.
So
That's a negation.
Okay, I wouldn't agree with that one, and here we now. If you've got to go, this is a debate. Let's return to these points and deeper.
It's great
Lovely,
speaking to you.
It's really good to see you. Really.
I haven't seen you in a while, and you're taking care of yourself
I
as
had
well.
to go away for a couple of years, and I've had
You look like you have a bit of a
stuff.
tan as well.
Yeah, it's really nice, and I'm glad that you're back. You haven't been around.
Do you want to grab a coffee just before I have another conversation?
Yeah, for sure.
I'd love to grab you a...
Well, hang on. Now I'll turn you off by not doing it on camera.
Yeah.
I have seen you.
Oh, thank you very much.
Which appears to be made. I'm
Yes.
on.
Yeah.